Today we're going to cover off videos about fighter pilot Bud Anderson, test flight pilot Chuck Yeager, the X1, the X1A jet, and then we'll cover off another one I'll save as a surprise for the end about the highest altitude jump that had been done. Anyway, stuff you haven't seen before, I'm sure. Let's get right into it.
Clarence Emil Bud Anderson was born in Oakland, California, and raised on a farm 100 miles away near Newcastle, California. At the age of 20, he enlisted in the United States Army as an aviation cadet. He soon earned his combat wings and entered the air war against the Luftwaffe in Europe in September of 1942. Anderson's war effort was impressive, flying 116 missions without a single enemy hit, and having never turned back from a mission for any reason. Anderson's airplane was the remarkable P-51D Mustang, which he named Old Crow, after the whiskey of the same name. Anderson and Old Crow would go on to score a remarkable 16.5 aerial victories, making Anderson one of the war's few American triple aces. Anderson's ability in the cockpit prompted fellow...
Put that in perspective. Yes, 16 aerial victories, which was phenomenal, apparently, at the time. You would have thought of in over 100 missions that you would have a higher record of hits to really change the shape of the war. And considering that he's one of the best, that means there's a lot that weren't very good. And I find that it's just an interesting data point to know, that there was a lot of people spending a lot of time doing a lot of things that didn't necessarily amount to a victory, but maybe they provided reconnaissance, it tested the limits of different systems, it did all these things. And, yeah, so that was interesting. That's what I think they refer to him later as with a special name for
fellow
that.
Pilot and close friend Chuck Yeager to remark that Anderson was the best fighter pilot I ever saw. After the war, Anderson became a test pilot, first at Wright Field in Ohio, and later at Edwards in California. Anderson was involved in Project Tiptoe, an ill-fated experiment intended as a way to increase the fighter escort range for bombers. The concept involved joining 2 fighter aircraft to each wingtip of a bomber, realizing a more aerodynamically efficient configuration versus 3 individual aircraft flying independently. It was hoped that the increase in efficiency could be translated to increase range, allowing a bomber to enjoy fighter protection for a longer period of time. In theory, this concept had merit from an aerodynamic perspective. However, the mechanics of linking the aircraft up in flight proved dangerous, and the project ended when a bomber and 1 fighter was destroyed with the loss of all of the crew. Anderson, flying the other fighter, was the only survivor. Anderson was also involved in the Parasite Fighter Project. Like Project Tiptoe, this concept was meant to provide increased fighter protection to vulnerable bomber aircraft. The project called for the bomber to carry a fighter aboard, attached underneath the aircraft and accessible via the bomb bay. The fighter could then be released should the bomber come under attack. Recovery of the fighter was accomplished through the use of a trapeze mechanism, which could capture the aircraft in flight and retract it up into the bomb bay. Although successful releases and recoveries were performed, the concept was ultimately rejected as impractical.
These test flight pilots, can you imagine what they were going through? Unbelievable. They've got this crazy looking ideas, these last 2 ideas. Maybe, not that crazy, but the wingtip connecting one looked very precarious. And they're like, oh yeah, let's give it a try. Okay, no, not worth it. Let's move on to something else. And for what, from maybe marginal benefits, it's hard to tell what the benefits were. And I guess they were significant enough to invest in. Think of something else like that you've experienced in your lifetime or in the past couple decades where it was what do they call it? Like a moonshot, right? Where you're really going to try, put all the effort into achieving something momentous, even though it might fail.
Cool. Anderson continued his military career, commanding an F-86 squadron in post-war Korea and an F-105 wing in Okinawa. He completed 2 assignments at the Pentagon and returned to Southeast Asia to command the 355th Tactical Fighter Wing, where he personally flew bombing strikes against enemy supply lines. Anderson retired from the military in 1972 as a colonel. With his impressive military career at an honorable end, Anderson entered civilian life by joining the McDonnell Aircraft Corporation, where he managed the company's flight test facility for 12 years. After full retirement in 1984, Anderson continued to maintain his CFI rating and continued to fly all types of aircraft, including his beloved P-51. Today, Anderson lives in Auburn, California with his wife of almost 70 years, Eleanor. He continues to give lectures and attend air shows all throughout the country. In all, Anderson has flown more than 130 types of aircraft, racking up more than 7,500 hours. Trade a Plane TV recently caught up with Bud Anderson and asked him about flying the Mustang, as well as his favorite aircraft of the many types he has flown.
But it's a
Yeah, so you go and watch the full video on Trade a Plane TV on their YouTube channel. I'll give them a shout out when I publish it and put in the description, a link in the description. Actually, I'll add this this will be added to the playlist for Pushing the Limits. Check that out. Now, one of the other most famous test pilots ever, Mr. Chuck Yeager. We're going to go way back in the stock footage here to 1947. I don't know if this video is the first flight of this aircraft, but the X-1 was the first supersonic flight. So you'll see this is some amazing footage here. Oh, sorry, this is actually the background tech of just getting it off the ground and all the things that went into making that happen.
Not until that moment when man-carrying rockets probe the transonic range will any research be so packed with thrills for the pilot as with the current tests of human transonic flight in the Air Force's rocket-propelled XS-1 airplane. This supersonic research aircraft is powered by liquid propellants, liquid oxygen as an oxidizer, and a mixture of alcohol and water as a fuel. As a force for feeding these propellants to the engine, nitrogen in liquid form is initially stored in a 5,000-gallon spherical tank at the fueling site. Here, a nitrogen evaporator vaporizes the liquid nitrogen to a gaseous state under a pressure of 4,800 pounds per square inch. This is transferred to the storage capacity of a dozen spheres inside the aircraft. Engine change is normally accomplished after 1 hour's running time when a new or rebuilt engine is installed. Checked out at the factory.
Ironically, these engines here were, modular enough that they could be pulled out and popped in and replaced, even after just 1 hour of usage. So that's the modularity. Can you imagine if we had that modularity today in terms of auto parts and engines and things like that, where you could just flip them in, flip them out, give them a try, refurbish them, put them back in action.
Factory with a thrust well over 6,000 pounds, these engines have presented no major maintenance or operational problems. With the engine cowling removed, easy access to the engine mounts is possible. For connecting propellant and pressure lines and other connections to instruments in the cockpit, small
We're not going to
access
watch
doors
the
are
whole
provided further
video.
forward. NACA has provided a
But
group
I
of research
did.
recording instruments of conventional thickness at the tip, as thickness increases to 1/2 inch at the
I
inboard
did
end.
want to show you how they take off with this jet.
Once aligned with the loading pit ramp, the XS-1 is carefully lowered by cable to its position for suspension from an especially modified B-29. On this carrier aircraft or mothership, the bomb bay doors have been removed, along with the tunnel connecting the forward and rear pressurized compartments. Removal of the tunnel was necessary to provide headroom for the tail of the XS-1 when hoisted into its carried and launching position. Suspended by one standard Air Force D-4 bomb shackle, this transonic aircraft is to be borne aloft and released, thus eliminating the hazards of a conventional takeoff. Considering that almost 2/3 of this rocket-powered aircraft's gross weight is fuel, the dangers of a takeoff from the ground are obvious. Close tolerances between pit dimensions and landing gear tread on the B-29 require expert handling by the ground crew, particularly.
Yeah, I don't know if you missed that, but the aircraft itself is 5,000 pounds. It has 8,000 pounds of fuel on top of that. So it's basically a huge bomb. But obviously it's just basically just one big, well, actually four, but one big jet engine with a couple wings strapped on the sides. And they didn't really know how it was going to perform. And they didn't know how it was going to perform when it got up to a certain speed, especially. So here they're just basically loading it like ammunition in the bottom of the bomber.
As well as portions of the fuselage section of the rear bomb bay. With the loading operation completed, the mothership is towed to the nearby fueling station for refueling the suspended XS-1. Here, the same procedure of fueling with liquid oxygen, the mixture of off the ground, was during the earlier takeoffs considered a hazard. However, after 12 months of successful takeoffs, this procedure has been proven comparatively safe. During the same period, aborted flights were few and far between. These were caused by either some minor malfunction of equipment or a sudden and unfavorable change in weather. Here, with clouds beginning to obscure visible contact with the base, fuel in the XS-1 is jettisoned.
Skip forward to when it's actually
Preparations are made
launched.
by the 1,000 feet. Standard Air Force personal equipment is used. For flights below 50,000 feet, standard Air Force personal equipment is used by the pilot of the XS-1. For the pilot's protection in entering the cockpit of the suspended aircraft, a small elevator lowers him to the level of the cockpit opening. Upon entering the cockpit, the pilot
basically lowers him at the bottom of the plane and then lines him up with the cockpit hole that's in the side at the front of the X1.
Lowered, positioned, and secured from the inside. This procedure invariably takes place at an altitude of 3,000 to 5,000, and the checking of the procedure list continues with the XS-1 pilot sealed inside his aircraft. Here, the elevator can be seen in its lowered position opposite the cockpit door. Now, with contact and coordination established with ground radar and radio, and the P-80 photographic airplane, the moment draws near for launching. 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, drop. Number 1 cylinder is turned on, and the initial charge of alcohol appears as a puff of white vapor. Then, as oxygen is injected, the igniter fires the cylinder with flame and resultant thrust produced. With 1 cylinder firing, the photographic P-80 jockeys into position for a tail-on angle.
Yeah, they keep up for a little bit, but then they quickly goes faster than anything
With 4 cylinders
around.
producing maximum thrust, an almost vertical climb is possible.
Yeah, I'm just going to skip ahead
Air Force
to when it's
initiated an
landing.
accelerated transonic program on another XS-1, also in June 47. These flights with Air Force pilots were started 2 months later. These programs are being continued with the now favorable prospects of attaining speeds exceeding Mach number 1 and altitudes heretofore unexplored by any man-carrying aircraft.
So I'm pretty sure that this was the, while it was definitely the first supersonic jet plane, it made its first supersonic flight in 1947, piloted by Chuck Yeager. We're going to skip ahead to another video where it features Chuck Yeager as he hits over Mach 2.
No, for about 280 degrees. Hey, boy, make sure it's a minute when you drop me. It's about 30 seconds from now, I reckon. Okay. I'm heading for about 280 degrees. Hey, boy,
But I got to watch all this because it's pretty unintelligible, and the footage just isn't that clear. Eventually, this is kind of nice angle, but.
Okay, starting the countdown, starting from 5 down to 0. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, drop it, Danny. 8, drop. 1, 4. All right, just 0. 1 on now. Yeah. Watch those turbos, Sergeant Colonel. Put number 3 in manual.
It's actually quite a long video. It's over 5 minutes. But quickly they realized during the flight that once he exceeded the Mach 2, that as the engineers warned, he kind of started to lose control of it in terms of spiraling and spinning, and took him several minutes just to get back under control. He's basically not sure. He dropped so fast that he wasn't sure if he was going to be able to recover it.
That's 25 steps. I can't see much more. I got it.
So he's so desperately flying this that he can't give an update to the rest of the team because he's trying to get out of this. And you can see the spinning and stuff. It must have been frightening. And the other thing is that this aircraft had no ejection seat. He wouldn't have been able to open the canopy and get out in any case, especially if it's in a spin right like this. But the altitude drop was I think it was 25,000 feet per second or something like that. It was really dramatic decline that would have really freaked him out.
Got 1,800 pounds of source pressure.
does recover, and then is like, whew, I can make it back to base. And at one point he even says, oh, they were right. You know, it was going to be impossible to control after a certain point, after Mach 2. And then he comes in for a successful landing. The fact that both these guys, Bud Anderson and Chuck Yeager, both survived to their really late in life is amazing and miraculous. I remember reading Chuck Yeager's biography when I was young, as a teen actually, and was so impressed by it that it was really inspirational. It would be worth checking that out. Of course, they have the Right Stuff movie as well. I haven't watched that for a long time, so I don't know what I think of that. But these guys are covered in some more popular movies. All right, over to the last video for today. Now, this is the space jump maybe the space jump you haven't heard of, by Colonel Joseph W. Kittinger, Jr. We got it in his own words right here.
Space is hostile. It's very hostile to man. Blood boils at 65,000 feet. The Project Tiptoe was the first time anybody was outside of a spacecraft in a space environment. I'm Joe Kittinger. I spent 29 years in the United States Air Force. Half my career was spent in research and development, working as a test pilot. The other half was a fighter pilot. I was a project officer on Project Tiptoe. The two objectives of Project Tiptoe was, first, how to protect a man in a space environment, and second of all, how to provide the means of escape in very high altitude. When a person ejects at extreme high altitude, he is liable to spin. And the higher you eject, the more spinning you can do. Unfortunately, we didn't have aircraft that would go that high. The only thing that could get up that high was a balloon vehicle. The takeoff was in the morning at about 6 o'clock. The climb time from takeoff to 102,000 feet was about an hour and a half. And 40,000 feet, which is where my pressure suit inflates. And I suddenly discovered that the pressure suit glove in my right hand was not working. I knew that if I told the people on the ground that it wasn't working, that they'd make me abort the flight. So I opted not to tell the people on the ground that I had this problem. I could not use my right hand during the flight. Everything I had to use my left hand. It swelled up about twice its normal size. Well, the sign on the bottom of the gondola was, "This is the highest step in space." Think about being at 102,000 feet. It was a very interesting experience for me to sit there.
So 102,000 feet, just to put it into perspective, the Red Bull Felix, what's his name now? Baumgartner, did jump from 127,000 feet. So it's, he's still way up here.
There and look at the horizon, and I could see over 400 miles from that altitude. My guy on the ground said, "Okay, we're in position, you're clear to jump." And I jumped. I fell for, it seemed like I wasn't moving at all. There was no crescent, no velocity. There's nothing you can see. So I rolled over my back, I looked up, and I saw the balloon flying into space. I said, "My gosh, that's amazing." And then suddenly I realized that the balloon was sitting still, and I was going down at a fantastic rate. And then the small drogue chute came out, and I free fell, stabilized from that altitude all the way down to 14,000 feet with my main parachute open. And then it was just a question of getting down to the ground. When I landed, my team was right there immediately. We were just ecstatic because we had accomplished what we set out to do. We had shown that man could go into space and work properly. We showed that we could protect him in a space environment. We showed that we could get a man down from high altitude. So there were a lot of firsts on the program. And as a result of this test, today, some 54 years later, every ejection seat in the world uses a small drogue chute to stabilize the free fall from high altitude. We were breaking barriers. We were setting new goals and exceeding those goals.
And thank you for your service. Now, the one thing to note with a lot of these experiments is that the safety precautions and knowledge that they gained from doing them, have probably had an impact in everything from civil aviation, obviously, into the military as well, and into space exploration and getting up to these super high altitudes, flying jets and planes in environments they'd never been flown in before. That's pretty amazing stuff, and I found it inspirational when I was young. I hope you'll find it inspirational going forward. And just a reminder, like and subscribe. Thanks.